before we move on, we've just had a question come in from LB. Um, he says, "How did humanism, originally from Christians, become an atheist's philosophical stand-in for atheists?" I suppose that was supposed to be stance, and that was an autocorrect, maybe. um, uh, I, well, I don't know. Do you want me to hypothesize why? I would say that obviously there is a lot of benefit to the humanist stance, and I can understand why plenty of atheists would go to that, especially because we atheists like to tell ourselves that we are more moral than Christians because the Bible makes so many evils permissible, etc. So therefore, we want something that's good for humans, and being a humanist is, I suppose, one of those cornerstones. So I'm not sure all atheists would be. I think it's probably more on the liberal side of atheists in general. You probably get some very conservative or libertarian style Christians that are more Christians, sorry, atheists that are more focused on themselves and their family and things like that, rather than thinking of humans in general. But I do think there is a leaning towards humanism for atheists who have spent time thinking about things and wanting to be as moral as can be.
Yeah, I mean it's basically the idea that we can't speak directly to God. All we can go by is people's interpretation of the Bible. So we're still relying on humans anyway. So the humanist idea is that we can only rely on ourselves, even if we have these books, because it's still us interpreting the book. So what we should do is kind of maybe put the books aside and come to an understanding between all of us and figure out what's best for making a society that progresses with us. Now, an argument could be made here that it's influenced by Christianity, like LB says, it comes from Christianity. But our history means that almost everything has been influenced by Christianity. I know a lot of atheists won't like this, but Christianity permeated our society for a very long time. And it's only in the last couple of 100 years that we've started to move away from it. But it was still the foundation of how our societies progressed for a very long time. So you could argue that lots of stuff does come from Christianity, but we've moved past that now, which is what modern humanism is.
Yeah, and I think that's good as well. Just because you've got your grounding in something, I mean, look at fire. It might have started with someone rubbing sticks together or banging flint together, but you can have it in your pocket on demand at the click of a button. You don't even have to do the bit where you rotate that; you just click. So yeah, exactly. It might have come from banging rocks together, but it's not the same thing it once was.
It's progressed. Like science started a certain way, but we now have a very different kind of science.
Yeah.
But just because it came from those past things doesn't mean it's the same as those past things. We now use different ideas.
Yeah, and I mean, as Josh actually says, hi Josh, by the way.
Hey Josh.
It's a common ancestor, and actually, this is one of the things that I use when people say philosophy's dead, and about how science and maths came from philosophy. They're quite different to how they were when they first sort of arose from philosophy. They still use philosophy, especially science and the scientific method and all of that, but they are quite different entities now. And it's like the why they're still monkeys. Well, philosophy has continued to evolve as well. So let's say had the split here and they're all a bit similar and all on a little, and then they're here. Okay, and quite different entities that are symbiotic with certain fields that go back and forth, but they are quite different things now. So you could say the same with anything that came from Christianity. This was the Christian version, and like all the millions of different denominations, humanism as it once was is now over here. And there probably is Christian humanism versus secular humanism. I haven't looked too much into this one myself, just humanism in general, but I imagine there is a slightly different take on it. Some using more biblical virtues and morals, whereas others is looking for more of a humanist side to it without the biblical stuff. There's a few other comments. Opie says it was after the Four Horsemen with Silverman and Dillahunty. That's sort of when it changed. And Josh says, I'd say it because it encompasses typical atheist beliefs with leaving a loophole for godlessness. Yeah, that's fair. LB says also, not necessarily Christianity, but just the theist and deist thinkers as well, with the exception of David Hume. He was an atheist.
Yeah.
But and he's one of your favorite philosophers as well.
Yeah.
Even though you disagree with him on morality.
Yeah. He describes a part of it, but not the whole. Sort
Yeah.
of like what we're discussing here.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, LB. If you got any more, let us know. But a time for you to carry on, Dave.
Well, just to go back to the thing about humanism coming from Christianity, if we think of something like evolution, evolution came from Darwin's theory, but it's no longer Darwin's theory.
No, that's true.
It's
Evolution
heavily
has
influenced.
evolved.
Yeah, basically, it's heavily influenced, but it's no longer the same thing.
Exactly, and that's why there's very little point in someone arguing against Darwinian evolution, which you often see. It's almost the creationist go-to, and you're like, okay, yeah, but the ideas have come on along since then. There's still the whole natural selection bit, but that's just a part of what we understand about evolution now, and it's so much bigger. So yeah, that's a really good example to give.
It's the best. It's the first one that comes to mind, and the best one that comes to mind.
Well, it's always the best when it comes to your mind, isn't it, Dave?
Not usually. I'm not particularly bright. I just get lucky on occasion.